Hello and welcome to another Ahead of the Curve show. Today I've got my guest Brandon Clements on board with me today, who is a long-term friend of mine. We ended up meeting, Brandon, how many years ago? We tried to figure this out like last week and I can't even...
Yeah, I want to say it's been at least 5 or 6 years, probably.
Yeah, probably 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And we've had a very wonderful relationship and friendship during that past 5 or 6 years. And I followed Brandon quite closely over the course of that time. And Brandon, I would honestly say, is one of the most talented 3D artists that I know today. And Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the amazing, lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so glad that you're here as well. Yeah. So Brandon, can you give us a little bit of a background of, where you're from, how you started, and where you're working today?
Yeah, so I am located in Louisville, Kentucky. So I was born and raised in Louisville, actually born in Louisville and then raised in Southern Indiana my whole life. And was always interested in computers, video games, all the things that were fun growing up through the 90s and into the early 2000s, and decided to go to college at Purdue University, worked at an engineering firm.
Small little college called Purdue, right?
Teeny little college. You may, I don't know, may or may not heard of it. So loved my experience there with everyone. Met a lot of great, amazing people who are really transforming the industry right now. So that's really cool to see classmates go on and do things. And after that, I was at an engineering firm while I was in college, I should say. Learned a ton of stuff there. Worked with amazing people who taught me a lot in those 3 years. Then decided to make a transition into the commercial industry and do something more storytelling instead of like engineering and instructional. So I started my own business with Aaron Allen in 2013, I believe, of November.
That's right. Yeah, because that's where I met you when you guys founded Glass Hand.
Yes. So we founded this small company, Glass Hand. Everyone always asks why we called it Glass Hand. And the story is I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, and
you and me both, my friend.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's a common trait that runs through this industry. But The Outer Limits is like one of my favorite all-time TV episodic shows. And my favorite episode from the 60s was The Demon with the Glass Hand. So that was like hugely influential in, kind of what my interests, where they lie. And the movies that I grew up watching was like Terminator 2. James Cameron was like influenced by that episode. And so yeah, I thought it'd be cool just to kind of give it a name instead of a distinct qualifier of like what we do. And then I tried to allow the visuals to speak for themselves. And then I taught at Purdue for a little bit too, did some adjunct. And then I am presently at the 3 productions in Louisville, Kentucky. So yeah.
I'll bring up your screen here for a second.
Yeah, so we are part of a parent organization called the Ovare Group. So we have sister companies underneath the parent. The 3 Productions is more of a media content specialist company. So you come to us with an idea and we make it happen, whether it's video, interactive, completely virtual CG worlds, whatever it is that you need for your brand and your story, we're here for you. And then we have Scapecchio, who is the agency, who I was a vendor for. So that relationship started from the small business working with Scapecchio, the agency. And then we have Badge in Cincinnati, Ohio. They do a lot of 2D design, a lot of package design. So really talented folks there. We also have Scapecchio in Orlando. So you have some...
Oh, that's right. I forgot that you guys had an office here in O-Town.
Yes. So you got some peeps near you. I might actually be in Orlando soon. Who knows? Maybe we can meet up. And yes. And we also have Reunion in Toronto. They do brand consulting. So you go to them and they'll kind of help you figure out your brand and how to go forward. We also have ADM that's in Los Angeles, and they do direct marketing. Civitas is also in, I believe, Columbus. Ohio, and they do experiential. So if you have an event, they'll design the event for you. So yeah, that's pretty much wraps up that whole organization, I guess, that I'm a part of right now.
It sounds like pretty big.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot going on.
A lot of moving parts. The idea is that a VARE group can help you depending on, what industry you're in, what you need, and then we all work as a team and make it happen. So I'm super happy to be here. But I lead the 3D part. I guess I kind of left out what my involvement is, but I don't really know any of those other parts quite so well. But I just lead the 3D development and the renderings, the animations, stuff like that on the 3D side.
So let's talk about that a little bit, and let's kind of dive into that. So for those of you that are just tuning in, welcome to the show again. I've got my good friend Brandon with me today, and we're going to be diving into a lot of 3D related stuff, 3D modeling software, kind of technology and where it's trending and going. As I say every week, if you guys have any comments or if you have any questions for myself or Brandon as we go through this, please feel free to interact. This is a very interactive show. We keep it pretty loose here. So please feel free to make any comments or post any questions inside of the comments area of the stream, and we will make sure to get back to you either during the show or post-show. So Brandon, how did you get into 3D modeling? Like, where did you begin? Where did this passion come from?
Well, in high school, a lot of my friends were into like skateboarding and just running around. We wanted to document a lot of this stuff, so we would kind of make skate videos. We would film that. That was when I was like, I don't know, probably around 10 or 11, 12, like trying to figure out if we can get our parents' cameras and try to do some movie maker magic.
Movie maker magic as you're skateboarding and killing yourself and breaking your ankles.
Exactly. Jumping into bushes, blue background, white text, like all movie maker magic, star wipes and everything. And then we were actually burning those and like giving them to our friends. And so that was kind of the inception, I guess, of like creating something and like being proud of that and having people be entertained by whatever it was that you were creating. It was almost like a little form of escapism, if you will, for me growing up in rural Indiana. So that's kind of just what we did to have fun. And then once I got into high school and like junior high, I started going into like more computer science stuff. I was really interested in website development. Quickly found out that wasn't my forte. So back
I dabbled a little bit into that myself, back in I would say like early 2000s when Flash was a thing.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I started getting into Flash and ActionScript and started working in that whole realm. And I remember those days. They were frustrating.
I have so many great
my roommate literally used to code websites in Notepad.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
I remember there was like a Microsoft front page, I think it was what it was called. That's what we would use in our like little junior high classroom setting was you would open like the Microsoft Office suite and then you would start trying to build a website out of it. That was interesting, but wasn't really where I wanted to be. I wanted to still make videos. It was cool that we could make websites to post the videos too. But then I started getting more into, I guess, After Effects and more visual effects, just because we wanted to do something grandiose in those videos, something that people haven't seen before.
Yeah, something different. I mean, that's kind of what we're all kind of running for, right? Let's try and kind of break the mold and do something outside the box. And
yeah, and
cool.
Exactly. And in the friend circle, it was always like, oh, we learned to do this or that or slow motion or this. All that stuff was really exciting to us. So then I started entering like competitions that were like more organized. And in those competitions, the funny thing is, I was looking at this the other day. I was showing one of my buddies here who's a coworker, and I was really into like shooting people on green screens and then trying to composite them in something, another environment. And so I started getting into like 3ds Max just to kind of like build these little, I wish I could find it so I could send it to you. It is so funny, but it's just like, it's in hindsight, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like what I'm doing today. Like, and I'm making a living doing it. But back then it was just, I had no idea I could actually do that for a living. And I was just doing it because it was, to me, it felt like I was creating this world and I was transporting people when they were watching stuff. But yeah, so I had success doing that, and won some competitions. It gave me some more confidence, and then actually just went to college, like I said, at Purdue to do computer graphics. So yeah.
That's super fun. Yeah, I remember like my very first time getting into 3D, into the 3D world and 3D modeling. I was tasked to basically produce a 3D animated piece for a corporate client. And I had to build, it was basically, the concept was to have a statue or a trophy, sorry. And then on the trophy was a person, kind of like an Oscar kind of thing, or a mannequin. And then I had to rig it and animate it to basically jump off the podium and then kind of run, with the logo in hand of the company. And that was kind of the first task. And I had I want to say about 2 months to be able to produce it, and it was just me.
Oh,
so
wow.
I had to learn how to use 3D Studio Max. I was going like tutorial after tutorial after tutorial.
Yeah.
And back then, this is going back to about 2007, there wasn't really a whole lot of assets that were available to learn.
No.
It was like a lot of books and textbooks and stuff to try and figure this out.
DVD mail.
I wish I still had the video. I think I might actually still have it somewhere, but I was amazed that I was even able to pull it off myself then. It was crazy.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I remember when I was doing that and trying to figure out just what it was that I was doing, like what were these softwares kind of built off of. The only like real professional outlets that I can remember utilizing was Lumen Workshop. So like those were DVDs. So you'd like go on their website, order them, you get them in the mail. And then, Digital Tutors was the other one. And
Digital Tutor. I relied on Digital Tutor very heavily.
Oh man, yeah, that pretty much got me from from zero to being able to put together a portfolio in college. Was just from like Digital Tutors. Exploring
hey, that looks like Digital Tutor. Hey, that looks like Digital Tutor. Yeah. Hey, that looks.
Yeah, I actually Kyle Green was one of the instructors, and he did a lot of the lighting and rendering stuff. And I remember one of the first NABs I went to, they had a booth. This was probably around 2015. And it was so surreal talking to him because I just knew him as like his voice, and like I never saw his face. And then meeting him was just really surreal. Like, you have no idea how long I've listened to your voice and how you got me through school. Late nights. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a few questions as well as we kind of roll through this. And I wanted to ask you about projects that you've worked on today and kind of find out your take on what's been the most exciting project that you've worked on and why it was so exciting for you. If there's one that comes to mind.
I think that's a really amazing question. I mean, I feel like all the projects, no matter how big or how small, they all kind of have their trappings, if you will, whether it's like budget or time. There's always some kind of like restraint.
There's always a trap.
There's always a trap, no matter what, especially when you're doing 3D, because for me, I'll just want to like really take it home and make it amazing. So, you have to like think about your time and think about like how you're going to build it out, storyboard it, of course. But man, I'm trying to think. I think one of the best ones that I worked on, I think all the ones I'll mention are ones where I learned a lot. Like it was something completely new to me. So the first one that I can remember was doing GE Aviation Dubai. They had a cultural center, and we had to fill up that whole center with media, whether it was rendered graphics, pre-rendered graphics, or real-time graphics that everyone would kind of go through and interact with. So they would change the skin for like different companies coming through, different aviation companies, different investors, politicians. There was like all these different, high-class people who were like going through this that knew a lot about aviation. So I had to learn a lot about aviation and turbines and like all kinds of stuff, which for me was really cool because I was, going to Purdue. I was super into mechanical engineering for a long time, and I always thought, working at the engineering firm, that's where the path I would go. So that was kind of my two loves there. That was really cool.
And man, who doesn't love airplanes? I mean,
yeah.
I've always had this passion for airplanes. I always thought when I was younger that I was going to be an airplane pilot, and I used to have the subscription for those little cards that you could get in the mail with a different kind of airplane on it and all the information on the back. And I had a huge catalog of them, and I was totally convinced I was going to be a pilot. And now I spend more time on the planes, but in the back of it than in the front of it.
Yeah.
Or at least I used to, along with, I'm sure, a lot of the people that are watching today.
Aaron has his pilot's license. Aaron Allen, who I mentioned previously for the viewers, is my old business partner. And like when we would fly, he would always like talk about different routines or things they had to go through, and he would kind of like cue me into that. And I was like, man, you should have just been a pilot. Like, he really loved. But he had like prop planes and things that he would fly. So it's like just I think the magical quality of it, right? Like you get on and then you're in the air and then you're somewhere else on the planet. It's pretty amazing. But like that region in itself, the climate, the dust, the sand, all of that heats up in the turbine, and it eventually will like turn to glass in those turbines, which I had no idea about. But they talk about D-rate and the degradation of like the materials and stuff in those turbines. And we had to illustrate that and like teach people about that. So I was learning and teaching people, and like it was cool.
So did you have to illustrate that in the sense of modeling it and doing it as a 3D animation?
Yeah, we did. We had a lot of like cutaway stuff that we would kind of explode pieces out. We'd talk about like this one piece in particular and why GE had solved it, or at least, was better than the competition. We kind of had to do a lot of like how to clean the engines, like when they land and stuff. There was all kinds of like little nuances, little niche kind of tasks that I had no idea actually went on, and it was pretty cool. It was really interesting. It was like all stuff. It was all brand new, and I was actually using Octane for the first time, which was a GPU patch tracer that just runs specifically on CUDA hardware, at least back then. Now we're starting to.
Yeah, I was going to say, how long ago was that?
That was 2015. So that was
so 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years, and that was a very early Octane version, probably around 2.7 something. It was a lot. We've come a long way. It's crazy, like how robust that tool is now. And now you see it for like title sequences and stuff. So there's a ton of people who use it in the industry. It's very fast, which is the reason why we chose it for that project and why we had to jump into it. So then we started building like render farms, basically. Like I was using render services at the time, like Rebus and some of these more substantial render farms.
I remember using them as well. That cost a fortune.
Yep. Yep. So that was freeing in a way where we owned the hardware and the software, and allowed us to iterate very quickly, show the client very high resolution images for some of these video walls and large tablet displays that they were interacting with. So yeah, that project was amazing just because of the learnings, and it kind of set me on a specific path of, this is what small teams can really do. And it was a very positive project that I worked on. So that one sticks out in my mind. I talk about that one a lot to people. It was a pretty unique experience. The other project that comes to mind is last February. It seems like from February 2019 till now is like 5 years, but it's only been.
Oh, trust me. I was just reminiscing about vacation that we took last year, and it feels like it was like 5 years ago.
Oh, it's so crazy. Like I think everyone kind of has that fatigue of just like everything that's happened politically and like, the virus, and it's just, everything is just so strange right now. But the project that I did work on was in Brooklyn, New York, and it was with two very talented people who I look up to still today, like follow them very closely. Elliot Mitchell, he is a Unity guru. He creates a ton of different indie games. He also works with a lot of very high-profile clients to create interactive VR, trade show, museum type projects. So very location-based type of projects. He's kind of a man. He is just super, super talented. But he works on all kinds of projects. And then
so a huge shout out to Elliot.
Elliot, huge shout out. Yeah, thanks for putting up with me for that whole weekend. And then Ellie Zananiri, who is someone that I didn't think I'd have the opportunity of working with because I was such a big fan of his. He did 0 Days VR, which I saw at SIGGRAPH. Yeah. And it's a volumetric VR film that they had done with Scatter NYC. And it's super amazing. Like if you have a Rift or a Vive, highly recommend it because the story. Oh yeah, exactly. The story in it is amazing. It's so cool, and you're traveling like at the size of data through like computer systems. And 0 days is a term that's used for like cybersecurity, meaning that they have 0 days to prepare for an attack. So a lot of
you can call the iPhone jailbreak 0 day exploits.
Ah, there you go. Yeah. So that term is thrown around a lot. But he's
not that I wouldn't know anything about that.
Me either. I have no idea about that stuff. He's basically a computer scientist. I mean, the guy is brilliant. And he's done a lot of other different projects similar to Elliot in terms of experiential, large venues, things like that. So worked with both of them. They were kind of like the Ellie was more of the architecture kind of like overview of the tools. And then Elliot was writing specific tools to take all the data that we were capturing on set through the Connect V2. And we were using Breckle to like tag everything and process, attach metadata to, and organize. So we had a bunch of celebrities who were coming through at this old
metadata mania.
Metadata mania, tons of data. It was crazy, but you know they had the vision and they had everything, the tools built, and I was the 3D artist essentially. Like I would just do camera work. I would work with shaders that Ellie made, and we would kind of create this film. So I was working very closely with the director. It almost felt like I was a video editor in some ways because the tools were so well thought out that I was kind of taking everything from the server and just creating the story with the director. So I was almost doing linear content in a game engine, you know, with Unity and Timeline and Cinemachine. And that was amazing.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, and so we flipped that project in like 24 hours, I think it was. Just because we had the lead time for the process and everything. And I think if you read the article, it was for Rag and Bone and Tom York of Radiohead. And if you read the article, it talks about like the news had written this article about the AI was like editing the video. And that was kind of like the mystique about it. That was like the whole idea. But I was like, what? Like, no, there was like, you know, three guys
back behind the curtain of Oz.
Yeah, who didn't sleep for like a whole day, you know, or like 2 days or whatever it was. So it was really cool to see the press coverage from it. And everyone was super happy and really proud of the piece. And it definitely has that Radiohead vibe, that Tom York Radiohead vibe. So I was so honored to actually go out there and work. And that was just from relationships of people that I knew in the industry who had kind of teed me up for the position. So I was super happy to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing today, because I'd love to show the people viewing some of the work and some of the stuff that you've been working on.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So this is basically our reel. I'm
gonna just bring it on up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. So this is our reel here at the 3 Productions. I'll just go ahead and mute the track and or at least keep it at a low volume and just kind of talk over like what we do, what I'm up to. So a lot of what we do is production. That's kind of how this started. I believe that's actually coming through my speakers. I'm just going to mute it.
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it started out, this internal production group. We were shooting a lot. We were working with vendors, and that's kind of grown from that place. Oh, Chet Miller. Oh, thank you. So we have kind of transitioned into creating visual effects in 3D, kind of with the expertise that I was bringing in. And so Jacob, who is basically our art director in-house, he does a ton of the 2D animation stuff here and leads those projects. And so recently we've been really collaborative, bringing like non-photorealistic rendering from 3D applications and making them feel like they're 2D, but allowing all the dynamic camera work and the shaders and the lighting, getting all that stuff for free, essentially. So that's been a lot of fun, actually, jumping in and working with him. You can see here there's just a bunch of renderings for our appliance client there. You could probably guess who, GE.
Man, it's beautiful. I mean, you could almost not even tell that it was rendered at all.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean,
photorealism was really well done.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. Like going to SIGGRAPH, like I'm always going to the talks that I don't understand. Like I'll be honest, I'm always like in this room with all these computer scientists and engineers, and they're talking about software, and like the way that they talk about it so objectively, it's like there's still energy conservation and things that we haven't fully figured out in rendering, and I'm like, really? There's some really great stuff out there. It's looking really good. so I'm that guy that just, it's hard to take credit for some of this stuff because the software is so amazing. The tools that we have now it's just amazing. But if I just kind of go back to some of these as a visual cue, this is actually all in Unreal Engine using like hybrid rasterization and ray tracing. So, you're getting some reflection rays and some baked lighting, and yeah, I mean it's really hard to accept praise for it because the tools are just so awesome right now, and it's just so enjoyable to like jump in there and make stuff, especially with Unreal Engine. It's kind of like what you see is what you get, which is so different than where I came from, using like Mental Ray and V-Ray. Although those V-Ray is super fast and probably one of the most prolific tools used in the CG industry by so many people.
I got into V-Ray quite a long time ago and was using it, when they came out with their plugin for Macs.
Yeah.
And that became my render engine quite quickly, actually. I V-Rayed everything.
Yeah.
But the learning curve on that was pretty atrocious as well. Like it took a long time of tweaking and experimenting and messing around.
Oh, yes.
Within the material editor to get things looking the way I wanted them to.
Oh, no doubt. And there's so many different finer controls as like global settings and things. And there are some amazing people out there who know how to tune that to get the highest quality fast rendering out of V-Ray. But nowadays, like throwing it into Unreal Engine and having 60 FPS and with hardware acceleration for ray tracing, it's so much fun to just jump in there and work. So
out of curiosity, how long did it take you guys to do the piece?
This one in particular, this one?
Yeah.
So this one is interesting because we had done a large offline rendering of this for like different brochures. I think it was appearing in some printed material for a product that is, I don't know if I can talk about the product that's coming out. So I'll just say there is a
product that's coming out.
There is a product that's coming out that's not featured here. And so this was like the vignette for that one product. And it was kind of a slow iterative process, even though we have like GPU rendering and things like that. There was a lot of different people who were giving us feedback. We were getting feedback from creative, from the client, from us internally. We were just kind of reacting. And so this was like a experimentation of me saying, what if I could just do all this in Unreal Engine? And could we reach that fidelity, that level of fidelity? And so this one actually, oh, thank you. Yeah, this one was really fun. But I would say our kitchen builds, or interiors, I should say, because it's not just kitchens that we do, they probably take around, like, from the start and kickoff to the finish, around 2 weeks. So we have...
How many artists are working on
it? Currently, we have about 4 who will touch it, including myself. So I'll probably do most of the technical kind of setup, building tools. So we have different processes for, of course, translating CAD files and getting all of that looking really pretty. We also have like cabinet tools and things like that we can kind of stack end to end to allow us to create and design any room we want. And then we also use a lot of tools inside of Blender to like help draw the actual walls, the roof, the baseboards. A lot of that is kind of automated. So we try to work really fast and try to be able to react to feedback at an early stage in order to get it to this point. So yeah,
cool. I wanted to really ask you that question because, again, you know, a lot of the people that are viewing today might not have an understanding of the amount of time and the amount of work that it takes to even produce something, even as short as, you know, like a pass by. It could be 3-4 seconds, and there could be a tremendous amount of work just put into that 3 to 4 seconds in production.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, just the you know, is that the right I guess is the right person's house or whatever. We call it like the muse here. So it's kind of like this idea, would someone actually live in this space? So there's those kind of discussions that happen. So are we hitting the right target audience in advertising with this idea of a muse, if you will? So there's tons of discussion that goes into these pieces that may or may not be broken down or shown in a breakdown reel or something like that. So it's really interesting to be able to like take something from nothing, from like a blank canvas, all the way to this in about 2 weeks with the client. So we're super proud of that process.
So I'd love to actually hear from the viewers. If you guys are working in 3D modeling programs, which ones are you currently using? It would be interesting to hear that, and to actually just take an idea of how many of you are actually working in 3D environments as well. So if you're working in a 3D environment, or you're working with 3D tools, or even gaming engines, please, if you don't mind posting in the comments, it would be really cool to kind of take a tally of what you guys are currently using. And as well, if you guys, again, have any questions that you want to pose to us as we're going through this, please feel free to ask, and we'll address them as we move on. So Brandon, let's actually dive in. I know that you had a little bit about Blender, and you know, Blender's been really fascinating because it's come in extraordinarily long ways over the course of the last, I want to say, like, even the last two to 3 years. And it's been unbelievably well developed, I think, and moving into directions to conform more within the gaming engines.
Yes.
And you see that already in the posts. We've got Rob and Chet have both mentioned Blender right off the bat. And of course, Rob with the combination of using Unity as well. So,
yeah, so the interesting thing about Blender, and it may lead us into a different conversation, you may have to steer me back, but there was a coworker here, his name was Remington Markham, and he used Blender a lot in his free time. He was hired as a 2D animator, and then he was working in Blender at home and posting to his YouTube channel, and he just kind of like took off like with Blender, and he was showing me so much within it. This is around the 2.8 period, so I think a lot of people will look back at 2.8, Blender 2.8, as a very big monumental release, not only for them, but for like the graphics industry as a whole. Like, I think a lot of people really took notice, primarily because of all the tools that were just loaded into Blender 2.8. It was overwhelming. Like, it was just like this.
It's like they reinvented the wheel.
It was crazy. Like some of the tools and the add-ons that people are making for it, the whole community is just incredible, and they've always been incredible, but maybe not had that big of a spotlight for the Blender 2.8 release, because they overhauled the UI and everything like that. So I really
downloaded it myself because I didn't have a whole lot of experience in using Blender as well. I've always been pretty much a true and through 3D Studio Max guy. And, you know, when you're moving from one tool to another, there's always the element of having the learning curve. And when you really know something well, it's like, well, why should I transition? Why do I want to move over from one product to another when I'm already proficient in using this one and I'm familiar with it?
Yes.
And you know, there's always that big buy-off where you're kind of weighing down the pros and the cons. And since Blender's come out with 2.8 and the number of people that I've seen that have started to adopt it, I'm like, okay, maybe this is something I should really now start paying more attention to.
Yes.
And some of the stuff that you were posting as well in social media really got me thinking about that investment, because the renders that you were producing were just like stunning.
Yeah, yeah, and some of this stuff is near real time, if you will. I mean, it still has to write out to disk and save it to images or an MP4, whatever you're making. But the process of actually navigating the scene and making decisions are all real time. With Eevee, even with cycles, there's so many features that they've added to cycles in order to speed up your process as well. So it's extremely capable, and if anyone asks, like, what tools should I learn, I think universities and the I guess the Gen Z, is that what they call them now? the kids coming up, I think are just, they're going to know Blender. They're going to know the name because odds are one of their friends, probably the person like me growing up, the nerd, is going to like show it to someone and they're going to be like, wow, what the heck? Like, this is crazy. And the community is just so large too. And that's not just, you know, my opinion. You can go and look at the views on YouTube, like their subscriber count. It's much higher than any kind of educational channel now. It's starting to get into just people who are doing it as hobbyists, you know.
Well, the nice thing is it's free.
Yeah.
It's got an unbelievably supportive community, as we've already spoken about. And it's also now being used in a lot of film production as well.
Yeah, it is. The funny thing, one of the most eye-opening encounters I've had with Blender is I was with my mom and we were going to talk to her lawyer. Unfortunately, she had been in a car accident. And so there was just some legal things that we had to go straighten out because she had surgery, all this stuff. So I'm with my mother and we're sitting talking to the lawyer, and he's like, what do you do for a living? And, you know, I kind of gave him my spiel, and he was like, do you use Blender? And I was like, what? How do you know what Blender is? It was my mom's lawyer, and in his spare time, he makes Blender animations and works freelance. And
that's super funny.
Yeah, his name's Sam, and he's a really nice guy, and he still talks to me on Facebook, and like, I'll post something like this and he'll just be like, oh, you're getting into Blender, you know? So it's like, yeah, it's really funny, because even when I was coming up through college, the stigma was you have to learn Maya. Like, if you're going to get a job in the industry, you're not going to be able to jump into their pipeline unless you understand Maya or whatever fundamental principle, or whatever task that you're interested in. So like if you were interested, like me, in animation and character setup, they toted Maya all the way through. And once I kind of got out of the whole collegiate group, I started finding communities like Maxon was creating with Cinema 4D. And I think there's a lot to be said about the community of people using the tool, because if you're using something and you're running into problems and you can't ask anyone for help, like that's a big issue, right? Because we all have timelines and budgets and things like that for client work. And so if there's not a community there for support, or a decent forum or something, YouTube videos, it's really hard to justify the cost and continue using that tool, especially when you see the larger communities creating these amazing pieces. So I right now, if I had to pick my favorite tools, it's Cinema 4D and Blender, just because of the people that are involved with the software.
I was just going to say, it's funny because Holly, who was on my show 2 days ago, you know, the show that I had to postpone, she was mentioning starting to learn Cinema 4D, but looking into Blender as well. And my good friend John, hey John, he has been teaching himself Houdini, which
oh, nice. Yeah.
quite the ambitious task to do as well. I've got a good friend, Ted Pallas, who might also actually be watching, that has been working quite heavily in Houdini for quite a number of years, and it's just incredible some of the work and the visual effects you can get out of the softwares these days.
Oh yes, definitely. Hi, Holly.
Hey, Holly.
Is Jonathan's in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, watching while rendering a file cache. Nice. May the simulation gods smile upon you. I have been there more than once. So I guess I'll play this little video here while we talk. But yeah, this is just kind of showing the capabilities, the fidelity of Eevee in a very simple room. These assets were actually imported from I think it's called Blender Kit. Someone in the chat may know, but it's a plugin that allows you to post models, and you can download the models. So you don't even have to leave the software. And this is using what is this tool called? ArcPro, I believe. I'm so bad. There's so many like plugins and software
plugins and tools. Yeah,
I can't remember all their names.
Hard to keep track of everything.
Yes, but it allows you to kind of work non-destructively. So if you need to add windows, doors, trim, the stuff that I had mentioned before, this has come in really handy in just laying a room out very, very quickly, and then dumping some free assets, sending it to the client or the creatives and saying, is this even in the realm? Is this the kind of mood? Are these the colors? Things like that. You can get sign off very quickly. And you can see now I'm switching over to cycles on the display. And the great thing about that is everything that you create in Eevee, I would say 90% of everything you create in Eevee is almost completely transferable into cycles. So if you want to do some more high fidelity path tracing, you can kick that project over and still use cycles. I believe cycles is a uni path tracer. Like it only goes like one direction. It's not bi-directional, so it doesn't do things like caustics. Someone in the chat may want to fact check me there, but that's one thing that I've noticed is that some of the I guess more of the spectral quality that you would get from like Octane seems to be a little bit lost in cycles. But this stuff is under constant development. The overwhelming majority of people probably aren't going to want to have that type of fidelity and or control. So they present it to you in a very, very understandable, nice manner. Like it's really amazing to see how far this has come from like the first version of Blender that I popped open.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how things come into play as we move more into real time. You can already see by the work that you've done just working inside of the timeline in Blender that you're getting pretty much just about full real time results.
Yes.
Out of not even hitting the full production render button, to start rendering out your sequence.
Yeah, and I was yesterday tinkering with MantaFlow, which is their fluid simulation solver that they just incorporated recently, and did a simulation, cached it all out. It was about 220 frames. And it rendered in like 15 minutes on our farm. And so it's like I never would have had that kind of speed, without the software engineers and like these people making these tools. It's like just insane. So it's been really fun exploring Blender, and I'm going to continue going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I'm gonna, in all of my quote unquote spare time, which there has not been very much of recently. I've been kind of tinkering around a little bit here and there and taking little bite-sized morsels. So yes. I need to see if I could find something, a tutorial video, which I'm sure is kicking around somewhere. Maybe the viewers know where I could find something to transition from 3D Studio Max over to Blender. Some of of course, in modeling tools, there's a lot of familiarity, but it's always trying to find where those things are, and how those different applications differentiate from each other.
Yeah. my experience of like jumping into Blender, I always wanted to go in and change the shortcuts because I was like, oh, I'll just use Blender because most of what you see is things you would see in other softwares. I'll just change the shortcuts. That was actually a mistake because the community and the videos, the sheer amount of videos that are out there, if you're going to try to learn something and you want a quick tip, everyone in the Blender community is like a master at like keyboard shortcuts. And it really does speed up the way that you work. So I would highly recommend, don't be like me. If someone wants to jump into Blender, just learn the shortcuts because they're amazing. Like how quick you can do stuff. So that's my small tip, I guess, for Blender, starting out in Blender. Take the time.
Before we wrap things up, I wanted to jump into something that you've already seen, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people here have already seen, but you know, I love video games, and I don't know very many people who don't love video games. So I am just going to come over here and cue this one up. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, let me see if I could turn that down, but I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on with Unreal and the stuff that they're doing with Unreal now. So I'm going to add this guy in. Here we go. But this is what's on the books for what's coming out for PS5. And from what we've seen through the demo, I'm hoping it holds true. It's probably going to change a lot of the way that things are done and produced today within the 3D world. So Brandon, I'd be really interested to hear some of your comments about it.
Yeah, when this actually was,
turn it down a little bit.
Yes, the epic score underneath.
Or just even mute it.
Yeah.
There we go.
The interesting thing about this video coming out, we were at home, we were work from home at this time, and I saw some news outlets that just had posted something about this unveilment, and so I was super curious about it, and then I just like turned on the video. This is like 7 minutes after this was announced. I made a video about it, posted it to YouTube. It ended up getting a lot of views, and people were talking about it and asking my opinion. So like just being like working from like Unreal Engine 4 and seeing like the UE3 days, like the UDK days, I should say, till like now, and the level of fidelity. Showing this to someone, I don't know if they could like discern a pre-rendered cutscene from the real gameplay. Just because the assets look so great, there's so much dynamic lighting throughout here. The new, what is the new lighting engine called that they were putting into here? It's escaping me right now, but seeing like all those screen space effects for doing like global illumination, it's just amazing. But the one thing for me that's really interesting is the whole nanite technology, and doing some research on that. I was getting into like a rabbit hole of like mesh shaders, and you know, like all these things that have been in development for a long time, but I just didn't pay close enough attention to. I'm sure I sat through a lot of SIGGRAPH talks about this stuff, and then it was just like a big whammy, and like the internet just kind of like blew up about this video and just couldn't believe the fidelity that you're witnessing while you're playing through this game. A lot has to be said about the actual hardware architecture here, with the SSD that has been created for that for the PS5. They actually have a.
Is it called Lumen? I think Charlie mentioned Lumen.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Hey, Charlie. Charlie Moody. That's my pal. That's my pal here. Yes, Lumen. Yes, so Lumen is just an amazing dynamic lighting, new lighting engine that's basically going to be in Unreal Engine 5. But the whole nanite technology thing just keeps blowing my mind with the hardware architecture with the SSD. Tim Sweeney's commented a lot about, you know, how Sony has created, I think they have like an FPGA that like does compressing and decompressing of textures and assets on the fly. And there's so many layers to this that I just never knew before, and also was, you know, showcasing a lot of downfalls and a lot of inefficiencies that are in desktop computers, and how, you know, how desktop computers are built, like the ones that we're on right now. So it'll be interesting to see if like Intel steps up to the plate with NVMe technology, and like how do you like get it to the graphics card without going through the drivers and all this. There's so much to unpack there. But I just can't wait for the day where I can just dump in assets and experience them in real time. And I think that
day is going to be soon, my friend. We're getting closer and closer and closer every single moment. That is for sure.
Yeah. I'm hoping like first quarter 2021 is like when they're going to start releasing some of this new technology to us. Epic Games, maybe, I don't know. But that's kind of what I was reading. So I'll be actively using Unreal Engine until that point. So day one.
I'm sure a lot of other people that are watching will be as well.
Yes. There's still a lot of technology and a lot of like systems that I'm waiting to be put into place with some of the virtual production explorations that we're doing here at the 3. So it's Christmas every day, as I like to say. Always something to unwrap and unbox. So I absolutely love it.
So Brandon, I wanted to thank you for coming on board with me today. For those of you watching, thanks again for tuning in. We're going to stay on, of course. We're going to go into a little more of a Q&A, and you're more than welcome, of course, to stay. But Brandon, I really, really wanted to thank you for coming on board. For those of you watching, if you want to check out some more of Brandon's work and what he's been working on, you can reach him at the3productions.com.
Yes.
And also make sure to come in and tune back in next week. I've got a couple of members from a local creative group called Falcon Creative Group. They do a lot of work for the theme park and themed entertainment industry. So I've got Shaheem Alif, the Director of Technology, and Jason Amber on from Falcon next week. So that's going to be fun. And it's going to be the first time I've actually had more than one person on the show at a time. So it's going to be interesting kind of new format for me as well. But please tune in and check that out next week. And, thanks for watching. So, yeah, Brennan, some of the stuff that's kind of coming down the pipe and what's kind of happening in today's world, Jonathan was mentioning Houdini. Have you done any work with Houdini, or have you guys been working with Houdini in the studio?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with all the tool building that I was talking about earlier. I start to hit a certain wall with some applications just because they're not procedural by nature. And a lot of those workflows are kind of destructive. So even in college, Houdini was very interesting to me, although I felt like I didn't have a robust computer to run it. I had all these preconceived notions about it. But currently we are using it here at the 3. We just hired a very talented woman, Anna Hardy. She graduated from Purdue as well, so boil her up. And that's her software package of choice. So I can't wait to learn a lot from her, and I hope that relationship is mutual, and beneficial to both of us, just because she's learning a lot of Cinema 4D stuff and working with our animation team. And I can't wait to dive into Houdini even further, just to create some of our own processes with like HDA assets, which those are like Houdini digital assets.
Yeah.
And most of the Houdini engine is packaged into other software. So you can kind of promote those variables and those tools and then bring them into Unreal Engine, Unity. Cinema 4D has a great loader for HDAs. I
know for us in the media server world, we're talking about being able to natively load HDAs into media servers as well, to be able to use those assets very similarly to the way that we manipulate and use notch blocks.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be actually really cool to see, exploring like generative content using HDAs. That would be really, really cool. Something I'd actually like to witness. And that's actually one thing about the world that you live in and work in, Jeffrey, is you've introduced me a lot to generative content, media servers, location-based entertainment stuff. So that's always something that I'm like looking at just because of you. So thank you for sharing all your wealth of information about that side of the industry.
My pleasure.
I don't know if I would have found it any other way, or at least I wouldn't have had a great tour guide to lead me through the the industries. So it's been super fun seeing like all the different tools and things that you're doing right now.
Well, the fun thing is everything kind of crosses their paths, and when we're getting into all of these, when you go from graphic design to motion graphics to visual effects and 3D animation and even like stop animations and more traditional art and more traditional workflows. It all kind of comes back together.
Yes.
And it's been really quite the journey working inside of the entertainment industry, because we kind of get everything thrown at us. Like Holly on here has been doing a lot of stuff in After Effects, and she's been VJing and using more traditional methods for creating media, but playing it all back in a real-time fashion and mixing it and compositing it on the fly.
Yes.
And then we've got people like Chet that's on here as well, good friend Chet, and Jonathan, or John. I've always known him as John and John Tom. But we've been more accustomed to working like with beefier media and canvases that kind of expand the normal limits. Yes. and blanket these huge different canvas types, but working with all kinds of different mediums that just kind of get tossed at us from all different angles, and we're like, and I mean, I'm still learning today about software platforms and technologies that I've never even heard of before.
Right.
And stuff coming out of cracks. And I'm like, okay, part of my job has been to really try and stay on top of technology and all of these different things that people are creating and people are doing, so that I can try and work out some sort of way to be able to build that into a workflow.
Right.
And it's challenging.
Yeah, it is. I also think it's like probably the most fun too, because I love talking to people and I love hearing about their everyday and like the tools that they're using, and learning how they are kind of like breaking their chains for like the large canvas sizes. Like if you came to me and we're like, hey, we're going to do this thing, it's going to have this massive canvas size, I'm going to like just, be at a loss for a moment. It's going to, be really shocking. But most people, that deal with it, that's just normal, and so that's just how they carry on and create their content. So it's really fascinating to talk to people from different facets within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's kind of one of the reasoning that I've had about trying to keep the show fairly diverse and cover a whole bunch of different mediums and topics and technologies and stuff like that, and bringing on people from all kinds of different sorts of areas within the industry.
Yes.
To talk about, their focus and their use of technologies, which I think is going to be really interesting again next week, because it's coming in at it in storytelling, in using technology, but within the theme parks and within the themed environments, so it's a completely different take on the way that you do things for film or commercials or live events or anything else, The workflows are they have a lot of similarities, but they're still quite different in the way that they work.
Exactly. That's really cool. Can't wait to tune in next week.
I can't either.
I'll be on the other end.
So we're coming on our time. I just wanted to thank you guys. Thank you again. I want to thank the viewers for all of your support every week. This has been a lot of fun. Been having a really good time doing these shows and bringing these people on for you. If you guys also have anybody that you would like to see on the show, within reason, of course, or any topics you'd like to see covered, please let me know. Again, leave them in the comments. And or people you think would be cool to just have on the show and chat. So always looking for good people to talk with, always looking for some fun content. But just wanted to thank you guys for joining us on this journey. Please tune in again next week to check out Falcon's Creative Group. Brandon, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being on the show. If you guys want to check out more of Brandon's work, please check out the 3 productions. And as I say every week, stay ahead of the curve, everybody.